Today is October 27th, 2020. The 2020 presidential election is now exactly 1 week away. A week from now is November 3rd, 2020, which also happens to be Election Day. And it is on this day when we'll finally start to have a good idea of what this presidential race looks like, whether it's a landslide for Biden, landslide for Trump, or a close match. I'm almost 100% sure that it's not going to be a Trump landslide. In all likelihood, it's either going to be a Biden landslide or a close match, and I'm leaning more towards the close match option. But according to 538.com, there's a 30% chance that this election ends up being a Biden landslide. In this video, I wanted to talk about my prediction for the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. So I will be going on a state-by-state basis. I'll be looking at each of the 50 states plus Washington, D.C., and I'll be talking about which candidate's going to win all those states and how close of a race it'll be in each state. I've already made 2 or 3 videos on this topic in the past, but since then some things have changed, so my predictions for a couple of the regions might have changed. There's a couple of regions which I previously gave to Trump, which I'm now giving to Biden, and I'll talk about why. So that's why I'm making an updated video on this topic. The other reason why I'm releasing this video today is because the presidential election is now just 1 week away. This will probably be my last video on the topic. If there are any major changes that happen between now and actual election day, I will make an updated video. I'll make another video talking about my updated prediction for the outcome of this election. That is if anything big enough happens to where I flip one of the states from being a Biden win to a Trump win, or a Trump win to a Biden win. But if nothing major changes between now and November 3rd, then I'm just not going to upload any more videos on this topic, and this map that I'm about to shade in will be my final prediction for the 2020 presidential election. So let's begin. We're going to start with all the states that I'm 100% sure or almost 100% sure are going to be won by Joe Biden, and I'm going to shade all these states in solid blue. So these include Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. So a lot of these East Coast states are going to be shaded in solid blue. Same with California, Oregon, and Washington out here in the West Coast, as with Hawaii, all the way out in the Pacific Ocean. And then in the East Coast, you also got New York, and in the Midwest, you got Illinois. So every state that's currently shaded in blue, I have almost no doubt in my mind that these states will be won over by Biden. Virginia, I previously put as likely, but I'm now going to switch this to safe because there is almost no doubt in my mind that Virginia is going to be won by Joe Biden. One, because Virginia has consistently trended towards the left in the past few years. It has consistently trended more towards the Democratic side in the past several years. And because Joe Biden's already doing really well this presidential election cycle, I can pretty much say that Virginia is a safe win for Joe Biden. For the safe Republican states, you got all these states out in the West, such as Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, not Colorado, that was an accident. And you got both of the Dakotas, North and South. You've got all of Nebraska except the 2nd Congressional District, which we'll get back to. You also got Alaska here all the way up north. Then you got Kansas, Oklahoma. Then you got all these southern states such as Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Indiana. Every state shaded in red, there's almost no doubt in my mind that they'll be won over by Trump. It is really unlikely, even with how well Joe Biden's doing right now, it is really unlikely that any of these states are won over by Joe Biden. Next, we're going to go for the likely Democratic states. These include every state that's currently not shaded in that Clinton won in 2016. So Colorado, Clinton won in 2016, as with New Mexico, as with Nevada, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Maine. And I forgot to shade this in earlier, but Maine's 1st district I'm putting safe for Joe Biden because there's almost no way for Trump to win this district. It's basically impossible at this point for him to win the 1st congressional district. So this brings Joe Biden to 232, which happens to be the number of electoral votes that Clinton won in 2016. And that's because every state that Clinton won in 2016, I shaded in either as safe or likely. Now for the likely Republican states, the only state that I'm shading in as likely for Republicans is Texas. Even though Texas has consistently trended more towards the Democrats in the past few years, and even though Biden's doing really well this presidential election cycle, I still don't think it's likely for Joe Biden to win Texas just yet. Maybe in 2024 the Democrats can win over Texas, and it is almost completely a toss-up state at this point, but I still think Trump will win this state. Even if it's not by that much, even if the margin's only like 3 to 4 percentage points, I still think Trump's going to win Texas. That's the only likely state for Republicans. For Democrats, the likely states I've already shaded in, so we're going to go to lean states now. These include all these Rust Belt states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. All of these states in the Rust Belt, even though Trump was able to win them by narrow margins in 2016, I think they're all going to flip right back to Joe Biden in this presidential election. The reason why I say this is because if you look at the polling averages as a whole, Joe Biden's doing much better in 2020 than Hillary Clinton did in 2016 against Trump. So I think that that trend is going to show in the results of these three Rust Belt states. And Trump, even with how well he did in 2016 compared to 2020, he only won the three Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. He only won them by slim margins. The margin was around 1% in each of those states. And the fact that Joe Biden is doing several percentage points better than Clinton did in 2016, I think that's enough evidence to show that Joe Biden will most likely win these Rust Belt states. Especially with Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, there's still the chance that Trump could win those states, but it's not looking very likely. Michigan, I'm a bit more certain that Biden will win Michigan than these other two states, but because Trump won it in 2016, I'm still putting it as lean and not likely. Arizona, I previously put as lean Democrat in my last video, but I'm changing that to tilt because despite the trends that have taken place in Arizona in the last few years, with it trending more and more towards the left, more and more towards the Democrats, I still think there's a chance that Republicans could hold on to it, at least for this presidential election. I think by 2024, it'll be a complete toss-up state and maybe even lean towards the Democrats a bit. Because Arizona was a state Republicans could depend on for the past several election cycles, but ever since the past 10 years, it has trended more and more towards the left, more and more towards the Democrats. So I think for now, I'm going to put it as tilt for Democrats, tilt for Joe Biden. Now for Republicans, we're going to get to lean and tilts. Republicans, I'm going to put Iowa as lean, Ohio as lean, and Georgia as lean. All three of these states I previously would have put as likely, but because of how badly Trump is doing right about now compared to Joe Biden in all the polls, I think that Trump's chances of winning even these states aren't really guaranteed as of now. I still think most likely Trump's going to win all of these states, but there's the chance that Joe Biden could pull a surprise victory in Georgia, Ohio, or Iowa. 538.com gives Trump narrow leads in all three of these states. At one point, Joe Biden was winning both Ohio and Georgia, and at one point, he was also winning Iowa, I believe. So these three states could honestly go either way, but I'm still leaning more towards Trump for all of them. For Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, I previously put this as lean Republican, but I really knew nothing about this district, but I'm putting it now lean Democrat because I've actually looked at the polls in this district. I've actually looked at the 538 projection model for this district, and it shows that Joe Biden's more likely to win, so I'm just going to put lean Democrat, lean Joe Biden. Last three regions actually, I forgot about Maine's district. Florida, I'm putting tilt Democrat because I keep flip-flopping on Florida because it's completely a toss-up state. I have no idea who's going to win this, so I put either tilt Republican or tilt Democrat. I'm putting tilt Democrat for now because it looks like with how well Joe Biden's currently doing, he could definitely win over Florida, but I also would not be surprised if Trump won Florida. For North Carolina, I'm putting tilt Republicans because North Carolina has been pretty stable for Republicans. Even in 2012, when Mitt Romney lost by quite a wide margin against Obama, he was still able to win over North Carolina. So I think that Trump will just barely edge out a win in North Carolina, but it's also very possible that Biden wins North Carolina by a slim margin. The only thing we have left now is Maine's 2nd. Maine's 2nd, I'm putting tilt Republican. In 2016, Trump won this region by a very stable margin, almost 10 percentage points if I remember correctly, but I think that margin, if Trump wins, is going to be a lot less than 10 percentage points. I still think Trump will come out on top in the end, but I think that it's not going to be by a wide margin. In fact, I'll actually put this to lean. I'm a bit more confident that Trump's going to win than Biden, so I'll put Maine's 2nd district as lean Republican, but Maine's 2nd district is a pretty close state. Not as close as Nebraska's 2nd, but Maine's 2nd and Nebraska's 2nd could decide if there's a tie or not. If the two candidates end up coming really close, which is not that likely, it looks more like that Joe Biden's going to win by quite a good margin, but if there's a close race, these two congressional districts could end up deciding the winner of the presidential election. This is it for my prediction model, though. I think that Joe Biden will win 319 electoral votes, Trump will win 219 electoral votes.